I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living, you get busy dying.
The Shawshank Redemption.
Filmmaking is not about the tiny details. It's about the big picture.
Ed Wood.
Well, well, Captain Forrest Gump. I had to see this for myself.
Forrest Gump. What do these three films have in common? They're among the 10 best films of 1994, according to Roger, or me, or maybe both of us, as we reveal to you and to each other our individual selections of the best films of 1994. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. At the end of the show, we'll each give our individual slates of the year's best. But right now, I'd like to start at the bottom of my list and work up. The number 10 film on my list opened to some of the best reviews of the year, but then it didn't find much of an audience at the box office. It's called Quiz Show, and the Hollywood experts are still debating what went wrong with the marketing campaign. Everybody seemed to agree it was a remarkable film, starring Ralph Fiennes as Charles Van Doren, a bright young college teacher from the 50s who became famous overnight as a quiz show contestant and then was tempted by corrupt TV executives to help their ratings by being tipped off on the answers to questions.
What's dishonest?
When Gregory Peck parachutes behind enemy lines, you think that's really Gregory Peck?
That book that Eisenhower wrote, a ghostwriter wrote it. Nobody cares.
It's not like we'd be giving you the answers. Just because we know, you still know.
The movie was about the opening wedge of a process that continues to this day, and not just in television, but all through American society, where style is more important than substance. And if you can get the ratings or sell the product or make the profits, that's the most important thing. This show was directed by Robert Redford and co-starred John Turturro as the contestant whose pride was wounded when he was replaced by Van Doren. Watching it, we could understand how the contestants were tempted, and we could wonder how strong we'd be if we were standing in their shoes.
Oh, I think it's a wonderful film too, Roger. In fact, I placed it a lot higher on my list, number 5. It's a rare American film these days about ideas. And you mentioned some of the ideas. It's also about fathers and sons. One of the really exciting parts is Paul Scofield's portrayal of Mark Van Doren and that whole sort of Brahmin society that Charles Van Doren wants to short circuit. He feels inadequate, the film suggests, and he wants to get in there, and this is his ticket to triumph over his famous family. Now, number 10 on my list, and it's Gillian Armstrong's film.
I've never seen that. Maybe I'll try and check that out. I mean, Ralph Fiennes.
Just here at the end of the year of Little Women, with a superior cast, including the marvelous Winona Ryder as Jo. She's the writer among the 4 March sisters, in a first-rate treatment of the Louisa May Alcott Civil War-era classic.
If I were going to be a writer, I'd go to New York and pursue the stage. Are you shocked?
This Little Women is very much about young women living up to their potential. The story does not feel dated in any way because of the strong modern cast, including Susan Sarandon, Gabriel Byrne, Eric Stoltz. It's not all warm and fuzzy. Sibling rivalries are explored. I was completely unprepared for what a first-rate production this Little Women turns out to be. I just hope it isn't thought of as a girls' movie. It's so much more than that.
Yes, it certainly is, Gene, and it's not just a children's movie either. In fact, I think adults might get even more out of it. And if you want a textbook example of great movie acting, look at this movie, then go home and rent Reality Bites and look at Winona Ryder in that film from earlier this year, and you will see 2 performances that are so diametrically different that it would be almost impossible to believe that it was the same actress. That shows real range. She is really talented, and she's terrific as Jo.
She's a great talent, and it's a wonderful movie. When we come back, more of the year's very best. Continuing our special show on the 10 best films of 1994, moving up, my number 8 selection is The Shawshank Redemption, another movie that caught me completely by surprise, a prison drama that wasn't so much about prison as it was about freedom, about freeing your mind so that your body is able to follow. Tim Robbins, one of our very best actors, plays a banker sent to prison for murder he says he did not commit. And in this tough-as-nails 1940s Maine penitentiary, Robbins befriends a lifer played by the great Morgan Freeman.
I understand you're a man that knows how to get things.
Yeah, I'm known to locate certain things from time to time. What do you want?
Rita Hayworth.
What?
Based on a Stephen King story, Shawshank Redemption was hugely entertaining, funny and sweet and full of surprises. I hope some Oscar nominations will be given to this picture so that audiences will be able to give it a second chance and see it in a movie theater like Quiz Show, this one didn't get the audience it deserved.
I hope it gets some nominations, too, starting with Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman.
Yep.
And, you know, they claim that the title Shawshank Redemption turned people off. But basically, if they can hear what a good movie it is, maybe that will help them remember it, because you're right. This relationship between these two men, these two characters, was one of the best things in the movie.
And Roger, you and I see movies where there are plot twists and turns and we can figure them all out. This one fooled me. And I think it fooled you, too.
It did fool me, too. The number 8 film on my list was one of the year's most controversial.
Yeah, that movie was a huge flop when it came out. It's crazy. Now it's, I mean, a lot of people put it like one of the greatest movies ever made, you know, so, but it definitely found its audience.
Controversial movies, Oliver Stone's blood-drenched epic Natural Born Killers. The movie was about how the mass media exploit tragedy by glorifying a couple of serial killers. It was only a coincidence that the movie was released at about the same time the O.J. Simpson case captured all the headlines, but real life provided it with an ironic counterpoint.
I'm not saying, you know, I believe in mass murder, but
Don't get us wrong.
yeah, you know, we respect human life and all. But if I was a mass murderer, I'd be Mickey and Mallory.
What Natural Born Killers said was that violence has become sexy in the mass media, and celebrities become so mesmerizing to us that it doesn't matter what somebody's famous for, just so they're famous.
Oh, I like the picture, too, and I do really admire the mix of visual styles that are used in this picture. I think that's a really tremendous achievement and shouldn't be underestimated. The only part is I think that when they get to prison and in the back act of the picture, I think the film, which has gone over the top
Didn't like
before.
the stuff with Tommy Lee Jones.
I just think a lot of that stuff and some of the interviewing stuff I think just was too much. I would have taken an edit to that picture and maybe saved 10 or 15 minutes.
Well, I would have kept
it. Still a very good film.
Okay, I'd keep it the way it is. Coming up next, more choices from our best 10 lists.
That movie's so crazy. I did a commentary with on Cinephile Sanity TV and Texas and Juno and those guys, and it was a good time because it's been a while since I watched. I just forgot how crazy that movie is. I like the last part because Tommy Lee Jones is great. He's like crazy, over the top. I mean, it is over the top, but it's entertaining. Robert Downey Jr. is great, and then he even like kind of becomes a killer himself and joins in with them, and yeah. Oliver Stone's a great director.
As we move into the top 5. Continuing our personal list of the year's best films, the number 5 film on my list is a diabolical film noir named The Last Seduction. The movie starred Linda Fiorentino as a hard-boiled woman who joined her husband in a criminal caper, then walked out on him, changed her name, moved to a small town, and after she met a fresh male victim, began to put the pieces in place for another caper of amazing complexity and vengeance. And, of course, that's Linda Fiorentino as the scheming woman there, and what was certainly one of the best performances of the year, although because The Last Seduction played briefly on HBO, she doesn't qualify for an Oscar nomination. The Last Seduction, directed by John Dahl, was good enough to bear comparison with Double Indemnity or Body Heat.
It's a real good picture, Roger, and John Dahl is really one of the exciting new names to come out of the movies in 1994. I picked on my list another picture of his called Red Rock West, which came out earlier this year.
You're on your list. That's great. Yeah.
And that came out way back, I think, in January or something. Again, it was first on video. Then it took critics like ourselves to give the film a boost and get it to be played in theaters. John Dahl, whichever picture you see, you're going to see a very good one, either Red Rock West or The Last Seduction. Okay, now we jump to number 4 on my list. It's a groundbreaking biographical docudrama called 32 Short Films About Glenn Gould, describing a celebrated musical life, not through some standard timeline, chronology, or greatest hits parade, but through an impressionistic series of vignettes, 32 to be exact, about the Canadian pianist who achieved notoriety by quitting public performances at age 31 because he thought they celebrated the artist more than the music.
My wife has all of your records.
Well, tell your wife that she has exceptional taste. Also, she's very lucky. I'm never going to sign one of these again.
That's actor Colm Feore as Glenn Gould, and we meet him in a variety of situations that director and co-writer Francois Girard uses to build a mosaic of the man. I really like this film, and I admire so much the intelligence with which it was made. I'd like it to be shown in film schools around the country to inspire kids to say you don't have to tell a biography just by starting at birth and finishing at death.
You know, I agree with you, Gene. In fact, this movie is on my list of the second 10 best films. It's in the top 20. And I agree with you, too, that by breaking form, he showed us here a way to kind of have little snapshots of various kinds of things in his life. Performance stuff, biographical stuff, documentary stuff, other shots that are just music and images, so that at the end you get a real good idea of who Glenn Gould was.
You've gone to somebody's funeral, Roger, and you've sat there just like me, and I know this is true. Everybody's felt this way. You say, oh, why talk in this formulaic way? Tell everybody, just get up and tell a story about the person. Then we'll know how they really lived.
Absolutely.
This is how you learn about a man's life.
Okay, when we come back, continuing the countdown of the year's best films.
The 10 best films of 1994. Number 3 on my list is Tim Burton's loving tribute to a bad filmmaker, Ed Wood, about the now campy 50s director and cross-dresser who lived to make movies even though he wasn't very good at it, butchering sci-fi stories and psychological dramas with the same heavy hand. Here we meet Ed, cheerfully played by Johnny Depp in a wonderful performance as he directs a scene featuring a heavy from Ed's regular troupe of bad actors. Mistakes, however, don't bother Ed, who never made a shot he didn't think was perfect.
Don't you want to do another take, Ed? Looks like Big Baldy had a little trouble getting through the door.
No, it's fine. It's real. You know, in actuality, Lobo would have to struggle with that problem every day.
Tim Burton, I think, identifies with Ed Wood's love affair with movie making. I rank Ed Wood this high on my list because more than any other film this past year, it communicates the joy of the filmmaking enterprise. It was also a tremendous amount of fun to watch.
It was a lot of fun, and it's not on my top 10, but it's in my top 22, and I liked it very much. You know, after seeing this film, I went out and looked at Plan 9 from Outer Space by the original Ed Wood, and, you know, it is a bad film. Maybe the worst ever made, as many people say, but it also does communicate a love, a real zest of filmmaking in ways that a lot better films often don't do.
This is why you and I have devoted our adult lives, all of our adult lives, to the movies, because we love movies as much as this guy, and we, in some level, we like them even when they're bad. And that's what Tim Burton has a feeling for, and that's why I want to put it this high.
Ed Wood is a great movie for anyone.
And technically,
really loves
the cinematography, the production design.
The opening shot of the credits is a great shot. Okay, for the number 2 position on my list, I cheated a little bit. I declared a 3-way tie between blue, white, and red. The 3 features in a trilogy directed by Krzysztof Kieślowski, a Polish director who now works mostly in France. All 3 films opened in America this year, and all 3 were far more unusual, unpredictable, and interesting than the average new movie, although Red is the truly brilliant one that earned all 3 such a high place on my list. The movie stars Irene Jacob as a model who lives in Geneva. One day, because of an accident, she meets a retired judge, played by Jean-Louis Trintignant. He is a very odd man who spies on his neighbors, but somehow, for the young woman, there is a bond there, an instant communication.
Vous êtes venu? Vous saviez que l'invitation était de moi?
Je le voulais. Vous m'avez cherché.
Pendant tout le défilé.
The other films in the trilogy were Blue, starring Juliette Binoche as the wife of a famous conductor. When he is killed in a crash, she tries to disappear into an obscure quarter of Paris. And White stars Zbigniew Zamachowski as a homeless Polish man in Paris who ships himself back to Poland as luggage only to become rich and get revenge on the ex-wife who dumped him, played by Julie Delpy. Most movies are strongly plotted and know from their first frames exactly where they're going, but in these films by Kieślowski, the whole point is that we don't know where we're going, that some of the most important events in our lives happen entirely by chance. And maybe we draw the lesson that in our own lives we must also be open to change. White and Blue are available on home video. Red is still playing in theaters.
It's a wonderful series of films, and I think that the point that I got out of the pictures is because there is so much chance involved, that we ought to take it a little easy on ourselves, be a little less tough on ourselves, like the judge is in this picture, like the woman whose husband dies in the first picture in Blue, which is my favorite actually of all 3, except for this great final sequences in red, which makes the whole series work so well. Again, what we're endorsing with this picture is movies that don't proceed in this straight, linear fashion. And it's a great achievement. Coming up next, our choices for the best film of 1994.
The Century Plaza, offering the finest in luxury, service, and Southern California style, adjacent to Beverly Hills on LA's fashionable West Side. The Century Plaza Hotel and Tower.
Now it's time for our choices for the #1 spot, the best film of 1994. And at the top of my list is Hoop Dreams. This is the brilliant and completely absorbing documentary about crucial years in the lives of two Chicago youngsters named William Gates and Arthur Agee, who dream of someday being pro basketball stars. It isn't often a movie takes the time or has the patience to allow us to grow up with its characters, but the texture of real life is right there on the screen in Hoop Dreams as we see these two kids recruited off the inner-city playgrounds and given scholarships to a suburban school with a famous basketball program. The point is often made in the movie that Isaiah Thomas also started in the inner city and also attended this same school before going on to stardom.
Then he goes to St. Joseph High School, and the guy gets cut. Say, Tom was real good. Why did he get cut? See, Tom didn't learn the fundamentals of team basketball, which is what you're learning how to play.
There are setbacks along the way, including an injury for William, and Arthur has to drop out and return to the city school in his neighborhood.
If he was going out there and he was playing like they had predicted him to play, he wouldn't be at Marshall. Economics wouldn't have had anything to do with him not being in St. Joe. Somebody would have made some kind of arrangement, and the kid would have still been there.
Hoop Dreams was made by 3 men, director Steve James, producer Frederick Marks, and photographer Peter Gilbert, and it was an act of faith on their part. They shot hundreds of hours of film about the lives of these kids so that almost every moment of any importance is here. We get to know Gates and Agee and their families, and in the process, we get an understanding of inner-city life that is totally unlike the images that so dominate the media. We see how strong the black families are, how much they care for their children, and how hard these kids are willing to work. Of course, the odds against becoming an NBA star are astronomical, but that's part of the story, too.
Well, Roger, this is also my choice as the best film of 1994. It's the best picture that I saw. It has the greatest reach of any film. This is an 8-year project by these 3 filmmakers. I've heard people say, oh, it's 3 hours. Well, if these guys can spend 8 years out of their lives, do you think you can spend an hour more than you spent on, let's say, seeing Richie Rich? I think you can handle that. I think audiences can handle that. The story is completely surprising. A basketball shot's a free throw, one of the most boring things in all of basketball, takes on an importance here in just the way you're talking about, where you're thinking about not just the score of the game, but what that shot will mean to the kids and their families. And their families.
This movie has twists and turns in it that you wouldn't believe in a fiction film. It keeps you absolutely on the edge of your seat.
You're right. You're living with these families, and they're great families. Having said that, now let's take a look at my #2 pick, which is Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. I think this really is, these two are the big films of 1994. Another film that broke ground both in terms of language and story construction, a circular story construction that had you examining, for example, a character's life after you've seen him die. And I like that. I know this picture turned off a lot of people with its violence, but I want to celebrate writer-director Tarantino for creating some of the freshest dialogue I've ever heard since the stage work of David Mamet, as we follow 2 killers, John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson, as they carry out mob business.
Everybody tries.
It's as lively a picture as I saw all year or in many years.
Well, we're in pretty close agreement, Gene. It was #3 on my list. And you know how when a movie is a big hit, it influences other movies and everybody tries to rip it off. I just hope that in 1995, everybody tries to rip off the idea of fresher, smarter dialogue, because so much of the dialogue in movies is just flat, and it only serves to push the plot. This dialogue is fun to listen to.
It's a real artistic achievement. Now let's take a look at the 10 best films on my list. #10, as mentioned, Gillian Armstrong's Little Women. #9, Red Rock West, John Dahl's darkly humorous thriller starring Nicholas.
That's an awesome movie, Red Rock West. Nicolas Cage. That's a really awesome movie.
Cage is a sweet sap mistaken for a hitman in a small Wyoming town. It's available on home video. #8, The Shawshank Redemption, an impressive directing debut by Frank Darabont. #7, Vanya on 42nd Street, Louis Malle's fresh update of Chekhov's Uncle Vanya with a script adapted by David Mamet. #6, Forrest Gump. We didn't leave this baby out. The most beloved movie of the year. #5, Robert Redford's Quiz Show, a rare American film of ideas. #4, the Canadian docudrama, 32 short films about Glenn Gould. Number 3, Tim Burton's beautiful black and white Ed Wood. Number 2, Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. And my number 1 film of the year is Hoop Dreams.
Okay, now let's take a look at all 10 titles on my list of the year's best films. Number 10, Robert Redford's Quiz Show, a study in corruption and temptation. Number 9, Michael Tolkin's biting satire, The New Age, starring Judy Davis and Peter Weller as an affluent Beverly Hills couple who discover the realities of unemployment. Number 8, Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers. Number 7, Tian Zhang's The Blue Kite, another epic film from China as that emerging nation re-examines its own turbulent recent history. Number 6, Boaz Yakin's Fresh, starring Sean Nelson in a riveting performance as an 11-year-old street kid who uses chess strategy to carry out an elaborate revenge against the drug dealers who are destroying his neighborhood. Number 5, John Dahl's The Last Seduction, with that electrifying performance by Linda Fiorentino. Number 4, Robert Zemeckis' Forrest Gump, with Tom Hanks as the simple-minded everyman who travels through 4 decades of American history. Number 3, Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. Number 2, the trilogy of Blue, White, and Red by Krzysztof Kieslowski. And number 1, the year's best film, The Wonderful Hoop Dreams. It's not often that we agree on the year's best film, but we sure do this year.
Actually, 2 years in a row, we both picked Schindler's List.
That's right.
Last year, the good stuff does really, the great stuff declares itself. That's it for this special show. Next week, we'll be back with the flip side of this past year, the worst films of 1994. That's next week, and
All right, yeah. They talk about Ed Wood. Yeah, I love Ed Wood also. And obviously Pulp Fiction's great. But that's about it, though. I'll see you next time.